At 9:47 a.m., under the humming lights of Denver International Airport, a German shepherd named Koda stopped believing the world was normal. The terminal around him was chaos in motion, rolling suitcases, stale coffee, boarding calls muffled under cheap speakers. People rushed, laughed, argued. No one saw the signal that tore straight through him. A little girl in scuffed white sneakers and uneven pigtails walked 3 steps behind a tall man in a charcoal suit, his hand clamped around her wrist, too tight for comfort, too careful for love. A thin star of David glinted against her collarbone every time he jerked her forward. She never screamed, she never cried, she just looked straight at the dog, her brown eyes locked on his amber ones, like she had been waiting for him, and no one else in this entire building. Then, her right hand rose to her chest with the tiniest tremor. 3 fingers up, fist. 3 fingers up, fist. 4 times in less than 8 seconds. Koda's training said ignore random movement. His instincts said something else. The growl that climbed out of his chest didn't belong to airport drills or obedience manuals. It was ancient, protective, wrong for a routine patrol. Officer Ryan Hayes felt the leash jolt in his palm as Koda surged forward and cut directly across the stranger's path. The man froze mid-step. The girl staggered, nearly falling into Koda's fur, lips parting around a single soundless word. Help. Around them, life kept flowing. Gate agents scanned boarding passes. A child complained about Wi-Fi. Somewhere, Flight Aid 112 to Tel Aviv began final calls. Only one aging K9 and one terrified 9-year-old understood what was really happening. This wasn't a family trip, it was a countdown, and the only alarm in the entire building had 4 paws. At 9:47 a.m., under the humming lights of Denver International Airport, a German shepherd named Koda stopped believing the world was normal. The terminal around him was chaos in motion, rolling suitcases, stale coffee, boarding calls muffled under cheap speakers. People rushed, laughed, argued. No one saw the signal that tore straight through him. A little girl in scuffed white sneakers and uneven pigtails walked 3 steps behind a tall man in a charcoal suit, his hand clamped around her wrist, too tight for comfort, too careful for love. A thin star of David glinted against her collarbone every time he jerked her forward. She never screamed, she never cried, she just looked straight at the dog. Her brown eyes locked on his amber ones like she had been waiting for him, and no one else in this entire building. Then her right hand rose to her chest, with the tiniest tremor. 3 fingers up, fist. 3 fingers up, fist. 4 times in less than 8 seconds. Koda's training said ignore random movement. His instinct said something else. The growl that climbed out of his chest didn't belong to airport drills or obedience manuals. It was ancient, protective, wrong for a routine patrol. Officer Ryan Hayes felt the leash jolt in his palm as Koda surged forward and cut directly across the stranger's path. The man froze mid-step. The girl staggered, nearly falling into Koda's fur, lips parting around a single soundless word. Help. Around them, life kept flowing. Gate agents scanned boarding passes. A child complained about Wi-Fi. Somewhere, Flight 112 to Tel Aviv began final calls. Only one aging K9 and one terrified 9-year-old understood what was really happening. This wasn't a family trip, it was a countdown, and the only alarm in the entire building had 4 paws. Ryan saw Koda tense before he heard the growl sharpen. The leash dragged across his palm as the dog surged ahead, massive shoulders lowering, eyes locked on the man in the charcoal suit. Victor jerked to a halt, irritation flashing across his face before he smoothed it away with a practiced smile. Ryan stepped into his path, badge visible, stance casual enough not to spook the surrounding travelers, firm enough to leave no doubt. "Sir, stop." Victor did not flinch. "Just late for our flight, officer. My daughter gets anxious when we cut it close." His tone carried an easy chuckle that never reached his eyes. Koda answered with a deeper growl, chest vibrating, lips pulled back just enough to show the hard edge of white teeth. He moved sideways and planted himself between Victor and Lila, a wall of fur and muscle that turned the narrow space near the boarding lane into a barrier. Lila's knees buckled from the sudden shift. She stumbled, caught herself on Koda's vest and felt the solid warmth under the nylon patch. Victor's grip on her wrist snapped tighter, fingers digging into the same sore spots already marked by rope. Pain shot up her arm, but she kept her eyes on the dog, He was the first living thing in weeks that looked like he believed her without hearing a word. Ryan dropped his center of gravity, crouching so he met Lila almost at eye level. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly. "What's your name?" Victor cut in before Lila could shape a sound. "She's shy. Rachel. Flight to Tel Aviv. Family reunion. You know how it is. Long trip. Big family. My mother will kill us if we miss the connection." He laughed again, offering the explanation to the watching crowd as much as to Ryan. Lila's gaze did the talking his words tried to smother. Her eyes were too wide, too glassy, pupils dilated like someone permanently braced for a hit. One tear clung stubbornly to her lower lash line, refusing to fall. She made the tiniest shake of her head, barely a tremor, but Ryan caught it. Every instinct he had screamed that whatever story Victor rehearsed had nothing to do with this girl's reality. Details snapped into place like magnets. No suitcase leaned against Lila's leg. No backpack strap crossed her shoulder. For a supposed 2-week overseas visit, there was nothing that actually belonged to her. Victor, however, carried a sleek black backpack slung over one shoulder and a slim carry-on at his feet, both positioned where he could control them easily. At his belt, just visible above the waistband of his trousers, sat not one but 2 phones. One glossy smartphone, its screen still lit from a recent message, and next to it a smaller, cheap model with scuffed plastic and no case. Burner. Ryan's mind supplied automatically. Nobody needed that kind of redundancy, unless they had separate lives to manage. When Lila's necklace slipped free from her collar, the overhead lights hit the tiny inscription etched into the back of the Star of David. The letters were small, but Ryan had spent years practicing the art of noticing. Hebrew script curled in a neat line. Rachel Bat Miriam, a traditional engraving, daughter of Miriam. Yet when Victor said the name Rachel, it rolled off his tongue like a foreign object, something memorized rather than lived with. Koda stepped closer to Victor's side, nose aimed at the seams of the black backpack. His tail thrashed, not with playful excitement, but with focused agitation. The growl faded into a tense whine, as he inhaled whatever lay hidden behind fabric and zippers. Ryan had felt that exact shift countless times around explosives and narcotics. This felt different, like Koda was reacting to something less literal, more human. People stopped walking. 2 teenagers lowered their earbuds and nudged each other toward the scene. A woman in a denim jacket angled her body, phone half lifted, unsure if this was worth recording yet. An older couple paused in the boarding lane, whispering while they pretended to examine their ticket. The circle tightened by inches, strangers drawn to the invisible gravity of suspicion. Victor tried to sidestep with a practiced sigh, as if this were an inconvenience rather than a threat. "Look, officer, we really cannot miss this plane. Her grandmother is sick. I can show you our reservation email. Whatever you need. We cleared security already." Koda moved exactly with him, blocking the path with brutal precision. One broad shoulder bumped Victor's thigh, forcing him back into place. The dog's paws planted like anchors on the polished floor, claws clicking once before going still. Ryan's voice lost any hint of casual friendliness. "Nobody said you were under arrest," he replied, eyes never leaving Victor's face. "I just need a moment." Standard "You understand that, I'm sure." Sweat gathered along Victor's hairline, a fine shine that had not been there a minute before. He shifted his grip again, thumb pressing into the delicate bones of Lila's wrist. She flinched almost imperceptibly, then drew in a breath through her nose like she was trying not to cry. Koda dipped his head and sniffed the backpack zipper, then the side pocket near Victor's hip. His tail's movement turned sharper, an urgent rhythm Ryan recognized as an alert without the usual commanded signal. Whatever the dog sensed, it hit him like a moral stench. His ears flattened slightly, not from fear but from something close to disgust. A young man in a baseball cap lifted his phone higher, camera definitely rolling. A mother pulled her toddler closer, her protective instinct rising even though she had no idea why. The air felt thicker all at once, like everyone had subconsciously agreed that something here did not fit the story being told. Ryan leaned closer to Lila, not missing the way she leaned almost imperceptibly toward Koda's flank. "How old are you?" he asked, voice steady, gentle. He hoped she would answer, even with a nod or a number traced in the air. Her lips parted, but no sound escaped. Instead, she looked straight at him, then at Koda, then down at the white marks around her wrist where Victor's thumb pressed too hard. Her message was clear without language. She did not feel safe standing next to the man claiming to be her father. She did feel safe behind this dog. Victor forced another strained laugh. "She's 8, he answered quickly. "Math isn't her strong suit." "Right, sweetheart." His fingers squeezed again, a warning masked as a reassuring pat. Ryan's jaw tightened. Every line of training told him not to ignore a K9 alert, especially not from an animal with 7 years in the field, and no record of pointless drama. The paperwork might be perfect, the smiles might be practiced, yet here he stood, staring at a frightened child who had already flashed a distress signal once and a dog who now refused to let a path open. Everything balanced right here. One dog, one chance. If Koda fails, Lila vanishes forever. Comment if animals can sense evil. You won't believe what he finds next. Ryan didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The change in his stance said enough. His shoulders squared, his weight settled, and his fingers locked more firmly around Koda's leash as he watched the man in the charcoal suit. "Documents," he said. The word sharp as a door latch. Victor's smile twitched, then smoothed into place. He slipped his hand into his jacket with easy confidence, the motion so practiced it almost looked rehearsed. 2 passports appeared between his fingers. He placed them in Ryan's palm, like a magician offering proof. "Of course, officer. We're all good here. A dad and his girl late for a flight, truly." The covers were crisp and official. Inside, the pages told a clean story. First passport, Victor Lang, 44, Phoenix, Arizona. Second, Rachel Lang, 8. Same last name, same address, same tidy photo booth lighting. Stamps lined the pages in orderly rows. To an untrained eye, it all looked flawless. To Ryan, that perfection felt like a mask. He flipped back to Victor's passport, this time reading only the dates and destinations. Israel again and again, 7 trips in 14 months. On every manifest, Victor traveled by himself. Not once had any Rachel shared his booking, for a man now claiming a close family abroad and a daughter by his side. His travel history rang false. Lila stood partly hidden behind the curve of the dog's body. Koda had angled himself so that his broad chest and shoulders formed a barrier between her and Victor. She could feel the steady drum of his breathing through the vest, each inhale an anchor. Victor's hand had moved up to clamp around her upper arm now, squeezing through the fabric of her sleeve, hard enough to leave new bruises over old rope burns. Ryan snapped the passports closed, but did not hand them back. "You said her name is Rachel?" he asked, keeping his tone almost conversational. "Yes," Victor answered quickly. "She's shy with strangers. It's been a long morning. We had delays. I'm just trying to get her to Tel Aviv to see her grandmother before her surgery. We can't miss this flight." His voice dipped on the last sentence, inviting sympathy. Lila's eyes were fixed on Ryan, then on Koda, then on the passports. Her heart slammed in her chest. She thought of her mother's trembling hands, of the way the door had been kicked in, of the nights locked in strange rooms that smelled of cigarettes and sweat. She remembered the school counselor back in Brooklyn, the one who had shown them slides and said, "If you ever can't speak, your hands can still tell the truth." She had already used her fingers. Now her voice shook loose, a sliver of courage. She swallowed hard, leaned close to Koda's ear, and whispered, "Ini lo bat shelta." The Hebrew words were small and hoarse, but they carried a blade's edge of defiance. "I'm not your daughter." Ryan didn't understand their meaning, but he recognized the sound of a child telling a dangerous truth. Her tone did not match Victor's story at all. It matched the fear in her eyes. Koda reacted first. His body tightened, muscles coiling. He pressed more firmly against Lila's legs, shifting his weight so she was completely blocked from Victor's reach. His head rose higher, ears pinned forward, gaze locked on the man's face. The growl in his chest deepened, steady now, not a burst of surprise but a warning that came from somewhere older than training. Ryan's grip on the leash tightened. "Easy, boy," he murmured, though he felt the same surge in his own veins. Koda was not scenting explosives or narcotics. He was reading terror like a scent all its own. From the edge of the onlookers stepped another uniform. Officer Kim Park moved with controlled speed, sliding into position beside Victor with the precision of someone who knew how to cut off an escape route without making a scene. She was small, compact, dark hair twisted into a bun, eyes scanning everything at once. "Hayes," she said, "you need a hand?" "Backup's good," Ryan answered. "Sir here is heading to Tel Aviv with his daughter. Passports are spotless. Travel pattern isn't." He angled the documents so Kim could see without losing sight of Victor's face. Kim's gaze skimmed the open pages, then moved to Victor's profile. "Busy man," she observed, soft but pointed. "Lot of solo trips for someone with a young kid and a sick mother abroad." A muscle in Victor's jaw jumped, his charming mask fractured by a millimeter. "What are you implying?" he snapped. "That I'm not allowed to travel. That's harassment. We were cleared by TSA already. If you people keep wasting my time, we will miss that plane." "If everything is as simple as you say," Kim replied. "A few more minutes won't change anything." Lila stiffened at Victor's tone. She knew that voice. She had heard it turn cold in motel rooms, heard it bark commands at men who scanned her like an object. She pressed her hands into Koda's vest, fingers curling around the strap. The dog shifted, accepting her weight, never moving his eyes from Victor. Sweat gathered along Victor's hairline, glistening under the harsh lights. His eyes stopped meeting Ryan's. Instead they darted to the gate, to the nearest exit, to the security camera perched in the corner. The friendly business traveler facade peeled back, revealing the raw calculations of a man measuring distance, timing, risk. Koda inhaled sharply through his nose, chest expanded. The smell of stress hormones, the starchy tang of fear-soaked fabric, the sour layer of old anxiety clinging to Victor's backpack all flooded him at once. His tail held rigid, not wagging, signaling an alert of a different kind. To the gathered strangers, he looked like a disciplined K9, doing his job. To Ryan he looked like a verdict in motion. Phones were raised now. A teenager in a hoodie recorded openly. A mother pulled her young son behind her, using her own body as a shield. The crowd's mood tilted from curiosity to quiet outrage. They could not name the details, but they felt the wrongness settle over the scene like a shadow. Victor tried for one last argument. "Officer, if you frighten my daughter like this, I will file a complaint." "This is traumatic. You're making a scene for no reason." Lila flinched at the word daughter, but Koda did not move. He pressed against her again, as if stamping his choice into the floor. Right there under the humming lights and the staring phones, the lie began to crumble. On paper Victor was a father. In front of them he was a man sweating through his alibi, while a little girl whispered rebellion in a language. Ryan did not speak, and a dog chose her anyway. She was 9. He was a monster in a suit. If you were Ryan, would you trust the dog or the paperwork? Type trust Koda, because the next reveal inside that backpack will break you. Remember, this is the moment where one decision draws the line between rescue and disappearance forever. The TSS secondary screening area felt stripped of comfort. All metal tables, humming belts, and harsh fluorescent glare. Ryan guided Victor there with Koda tight to his side, Kim pacing just behind, every line of her body rigid. Nearby agents sensed the charge in the air. "Backpack up here, sir." Victor hesitated for half a heartbeat, the pause barely visible, then dropped the sleek black bag onto the stainless surface. His fingers stayed on the handle, the way a gambler keeps one chip under his palm. Koda's nose hovered just above the fabric, drawing in the scent that leaked from the seams. His tail held stiff, body locked, a living alarm that refused to reset. The conveyor stayed idle. This search had moved beyond X-rays. It would be done by hand. "Open it," Kim said. Victor tried to wrap everything again in the same story. "This is unnecessary," he protested. "It's just business clothes and a laptop. We've already cleared security. My daughter is exhausted. You're causing trauma for no reason." His practiced charm stumbled over the word daughter. His fingers shook as he pulled the zipper. The teeth slid apart with a faint metallic whisper, revealing carefully folded shirts, a laptop sleeve, a toiletry kit that could have come from any airport store. On top, nothing looked unusual. That was the point. The TSA agent began removing items one by one, lining them up like evidence even before he knew what they were evidence of. Koda leaned closer, nostrils flaring, a low sound built in his chest, not quite a growl, not quite a whine, the sound of instincts forced to wait. "He's still alerting," Ryan said quietly. The agent nodded once, then dug deeper. His gloved hand pressed along the interior bottom, fingers testing the thickness of the material. His brow creased. The response came back dull, wrong, more like knocking on layered wood than on soft padding. "Feels double," he muttered. "Sir, is there a reinforced section down here?" Victor's mouth thinned. "It's a travel model," he insisted. "Extra protection for the computer. I paid a lot for that bag." "We're going to look anyway," Kim replied. "No room for negotiation." The agent produced a small cutting tool, slid the edge under the inner lining, and drew it along the seam. The fabric surrendered with a faint ripping sound, peeling back to expose a narrow compartment hidden beneath. It was too flat for clothing, too clean for an accident. Somebody had intended this space to exist, and had trusted that machines, not hands, would search it. The agent reached inside and pulled out the first object. Another passport. The photo showed Victor's face, but the name read Avi Cohen, with an Israeli address and altered birth details. A second identity, ready for use. Ryan's stomach sank. The next item was a stack of bills wrapped in cheap rubber bands. Not just dollars, but euros and shekels mixed together. Enough cash to move people, without leaving digital footprints. Kim flipped through with her thumb, counting in rough blocks. 18,000. Give or take more than a vacation bankroll, less than a full shipment fee. Money meant for transactions. Koda's breathing quickened. His paws shifted once, then settled deeper, claws pressing against the floor. The agent reached in again and pulled out a small battered phone, the kind sold at gas stations. One side of the plastic casing was cracked. When he pressed the button, the screen woke up without asking for a code. Whoever had last used it had either left in a hurry or believed the hiding spot would never be exposed. Then his fingers closed around something narrow and rigid. He drew out a pale plastic bracelet, curved from having circled a wrist. The lettering was faded, but still visible under the fluorescent light. Miriam Stein, age 7. For a second, nobody spoke. The buzzing belt, the distant announcements, even the chatter outside the checkpoint seemed to fall away. Kim's voice returned first, scraped raw. "He keeps trophies," she whispered. The words landed in Ryan's chest like ice. He remembered the Amber Alert bulletins from Chicago 3 months earlier. A little girl taken from a hospital parking lot, still wearing her patient bracelet, seen getting into a car with a man that security cameras could not identify clearly. Now her name sat on a strip of plastic, in Victor's secret compartment. Lila had been watching everything from behind Koda's shoulder, fingers clamped into his vest strap. She didn't know who Miriam was, but she knew what that bracelet meant. The agent's mouth compressed into a hard line. Victor's skin had gone the color of paper. "Check the phone," Ryan said, voice flat. No one argued. Kim tapped the screen, opened the gallery. A grid of images filled the display, 17 separate photos, arranged in row after row. 17 girls, all small, all roughly the same age range. Every face bore something familiar. Dark hair, similar features, cultural markers that spoke louder than any caption. Jewish stars glinted at 12 throats. Modest dresses, hospital gowns, simple t-shirts, different outfits, same vulnerability. Some photographs were clearly taken indoors against blank walls. Others had grimy concrete behind the children, pipes running along ceilings, a bare bulb in the frame. A few had coordinates embedded in the image data, locations scattered across cities and states. 17, the agent breathed. They're all kids, 7 to 10, max, all of them, all Jewish. Kim added, voice trembling, thumb scrolling slowly. "He's been hunting specific." She tapped on one image and enlarged it. A small girl sat on a stained mattress, in a basement room. Gray cinder block walls rose behind her, chipped and damp. Shadows pooled in the corners. A single cable ran along the wall to a bulb hanging naked from the ceiling. The girl's knees hugged her chest. On her wrist glowed the same kind of hospital bracelet now lying on the table. The same name in the metadata, at the bottom of the file. Miriam Stein. Her eyes fixed on the camera were hollow and distant, as if something had already taken the part of her that believed adults would help. Lila saw the picture before anyone thought to turn the phone away. The sight hit her like a physical strike. The sterile windowless room matched the descriptions she had overheard in the car, the basement they joked about when they thought she didn't understand. She saw herself in that girl's place with terrifying clarity. A noise ripped out of her chest, halfway between a sob and a scream. She lurched forward and folded against Koda, both arms wrapping his neck. Hebrew spilled out of her in broken bursts, fragments of prayer and fear tangled together. The dog went completely still, except for the heaving of his ribs. He bore her weight without budging, head slightly lowered, ears tuned to her ragged breaths. Ryan pressed a hand against Koda's back, feeling the hammer of the dog's heart under his palm, and under that the shaking of a child who had almost become a file name on a missing post. 17 little girls, 17 families, whose dinner tables had an empty chair, whose beds still held imprints that no one dared smooth out. And here, standing in an airport under fluorescent lights, they had just pulled the evidence of all of it out of a fake line. Koda had stopped number 18 from joining that grid of faces. He had turned one more statistic back into a living, sobbing child clutching his fur like a life raft. Share this story in whatever way you can, even if it's just by remembering the signs, if you want every major airport watched by dogs like him. Because while agents crowd around this table, and the engines of that Tel Aviv flight idle at the gate, another plane somewhere else is already boarding, and another child may be walking toward a future that ends in a room like the one on that phone.
Flight 812 to Tel Aviv sat heavy at the end of the jet bridge, a white metal lung pulling hot June air through its engines as they began to spool. Boarding was complete. The door had closed. The monitor above the gate had already flipped from final call to departed in anticipation, even though the wheels had not yet left concrete. Out on the tarmac, ground crews moved like small figures in a board game, unaware that one seat inside that fuselage held a man whose job was to make sure girls like Lila never came back. In the secondary screening room, the air turned electric as the weight of the discovery settled. The fake bottom, the second identity, the cash, the photos, the bracelet, with Miriam Stein, age 7, curling across faded plastic. Every piece of it shouted that this was not a lone predator improvising. It was a system, a route, a pipeline. Ryan felt his pulse slam against his ribs. Lila still clung to Koda, face buried in his fur, sobs hiccuping out of her chest. Kim held the burner phone as if it were a live explosive, thumb hovering over the last image. On the screen, beneath the grid of captured faces, sat one more thumbnail tagged with the same flight number Lila had been booked on. Flight 812. Date, today. Where is he? Ryan demanded. Voice scraped raw. Victor stared at the wall, lips clamped, the bravado gone. His lawyer was not here. His stories had all cracked open. Silence was the only shield left. Kim jabbed the photo open. It showed a man in his 60s, gray beard trimmed close, wire-rimmed glasses, a knit kippah barely visible at the top of the frame. He stood in an airport lounge next to a window that revealed the tail fin of the airline now boarding. His shirt was open just enough to reveal the fringe of tzitzit at his waistline. Religious, ordinary, forgettable. Under the picture a single caption glowed. Courier confirmed. Row 19. He's on that plane, Kim said. For a heartbeat, the room held still, every breath suspended. Then Ryan moved. He grabbed his radio, thumb slamming the transmit button. Abort takeoff. Suspected trafficker on Flight 812 to Tel Aviv. Possible accomplice tied to current detainee. Repeat. Abort immediately. The response from the tower came back too calm. The clipped voice of someone sitting behind glass. Negative. Aircraft is already taxiing. We cannot abort without higher authorization. You need a confirmed threat. Ryan looked at the phone in Kim's hand. The hidden compartment. The bracelet. The girl shaking against his dog's shoulder. How much more confirmation do you want? He shot back. You have an active child trafficking network using this flight as a delivery route. Stand by, the tower replied. Stand by. The phrase tasted like poison. Ryan slammed the radio onto his belt and pivoted. Ops. Now. He took off down the hall at a sprint, Koda launching after him without waiting for a command. The shepherd's claws scraped the tile, breaths coming in powerful bursts that matched Ryan's pounding strides. Agents and staff pressed themselves against the walls as the pair tore past, a blur of uniform and fur ripping through the ordered corridors of federal procedure. They burst into the operations room, a glass-walled nerve center, overlooking the runways. Screens lined the walls, each one showing different angles of the airport, taxiing aircraft, baggage carts, security checkpoints, radar At the center stood the duty supervisor, headset crooked over one ear, eyes flicking between displays. "What have you got, Hayes?" she demanded even as she gestured for someone to patch tower audio through the speakers. Ryan didn't waste a syllable. Victim recovered from Concord. False identities, hidden compartment, photos of 17 missing girls, all Jewish, all under 10. One image matches an older male courier already on Flight 812. He is likely moving the next shipment. If that aircraft leaves the ground, we lose him, and whoever he is scheduled to meet. The supervisor's jaw tightened. She flicked a look at the nearest screen, where the small icon representing Flight 812 inched along the taxiway toward the runway threshold. "You have 4 minutes, before that nose crosses the line," she said. "After that it's gone." "Send Koda," Ryan answered. There was no hesitation in his voice, only the flat conviction of a man who had watched that dog find things no scanner could. The supervisor studied Koda for a fraction of a second, then nodded once. "Get the K9 team to the plane," she ordered. "Tower, freeze the departure. Hold 812 on taxiway. Bravo. This is DHS override. Suspected human trafficking. Ground. Clear a vehicle lane. We're coming out." Chaos snapped into motion. A siren blipped somewhere below as a security vehicle roared to life. On the screen, the little plane icon slowed, then stopped just short of the hold line. Passengers inside would feel the halt as a subtle shudder, an annoyance, nothing more. They would have no idea that the world had just tilted under one man's feet. Ryan and Koda thundered down the stairs, followed by 2 more officers in tactical vests. The security truck skidded to a stop outside, door flung open. Ryan shoved Koda up first, then climbed in after. The vehicle shot forward, weaving between baggage carts and fuel trucks, siren whooping as orange-vested workers leapt aside. Ahead, Flight 812 loomed larger, a gleaming fuselage squatting on thick rubber tires, engines still turning slow. The cockpit windows reflected the sky, hiding the faces inside. Ryan's mind flashed through every failure report he had ever read. Planes that left before warnings could arrive, kids who disappeared between gates and foreign cities, cases filed under unresolved. Not today. The truck screeched to a stop at the mobile stairs pushed against the forward door. A flight attendant stood in the entryway, face pale, blocking the frame with her body. "We've already closed up," she protested. "The captain says we're delayed for some security review. Can you at least tell us what's going on? The passengers are getting upset." "Federal K9 sweep," Ryan said, flashing his credentials as he moved past. "We have a possible high-risk individual on board. Stay in the galley, and keep calm. Nobody leaves. Nobody disembarks unless we say so." The interior felt compressed after the open tarmac, the cabin full of recycled air, overhead bins, and the low murmur of irritated travelers. People craned their necks as the officers stepped into the aisle. Some lifted phones immediately, ready to film what they hoped would be drama, bored enough to treat real danger like entertainment. Koda's paws sank into the narrow carpet runner. The smells hit him all at once. Perfume, sweat, deodorant, plastic, fabric, the chemical tang of cleaning agents, the faint scent of cold metal beneath. Underneath that, there was something else, a tension he had already learned to associate with the kind of fear that coated Lila's clothes. "Let him work," Ryan told the other officers. They formed a barrier at the front, keeping the aisle clear as much as possible. Koda began to move, nose sweeping along the seats. Row by row, he sniffed armrests, bags tucked under chairs, the hems of people recoiled, then relaxed when they saw the vest. A few tried to pet him until Ryan's glare stopped them. He moved past row 10, 11, 12. Each time, his breathing remained steady, his tail neutral. Passengers muttered, shifted, asked questions no one answered. At row 19, everything changed. Koda's head snapped toward the window seat on the left, A man sat there, gray beard, neatly trimmed, glasses perched low, hands folded over a closed backpack at his feet. Under his partially unbuttoned shirt, fringes of tzitzit hung in view. He looked like any religious grandfather riding a long-haul flight, except his eyes did not match the calm set of his mouth. They were too flat, too measuring. Koda inhaled once, deeply, then exploded into a sharp bark that blasted down the cabin. The sound made nearby passengers jump. Drinks rattled. A child burst into a frightened wail. "That's him," Ryan said, pulse spiking. "Sir," one of the officers added, stepping into the row, "hands where we can see them." The man raised his palms slowly, offering a mild smile that never reached his gaze. "Is there a problem, officers?" he asked, in accented English. Ryan bent, snatched the backpack from under the seat, and placed it in the aisle. The zipper parted with a smooth glide. Inside lay 3 small passports, elastic band looped around them. The photos showed 3 different girls, none older than 10, each with a neutral expression, and eyes that already looked tired. Beneath the passports lay a folded sheet of paper. Kim, who had caught up to them from the stairs, slipped on gloves and opened. Her lips thinned as she read aloud. "Delivery Tuesday, Haifa, adjust price by virginity." The cabin went dead silent. Ryan's voice hardened to steel. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to traffic minors across international borders, along with anything else the prosecutor feels like adding." The man's mild smile twisted into something uglier, an expression that carried neither surprise nor fear, only contempt. "You stopped one," he said quietly, in a tone meant only for Ryan. "There are dozens." Ryan held his stare. "Then we'll hunt every last one," he replied. Beside him, Koda stayed locked, teeth bared, just enough to show whose side he had already chosen.
The holding room was a concrete box with a humming light and a table bolted to the floor. Victor sat on one side, wrists cuffed, ankles chained to the chair leg. The charcoal suit hung looser now, sweat darkening the collar. His face had settled into something empty, the salesman's smile gone, only the predator's stillness left. Beside him his lawyer lounged with forced calm, pen poised over a legal pad he hadn't written on. Ryan took the chair opposite and dragged it in with a scrape that made both men flinch. Koda lay down at his boot, front paws stretched, head high, gaze fixed on Victor. The dog's presence changed the air. This wasn't just an interview, it was a reckoning. Ryan dropped a thick folder onto the table. It hit hard enough to rattle the cuffs. He opened it and laid out photographs, one by one, sliding them forward until they touched Victor's knuckles. "Miriam," he said. A small girl on a mattress, hospital bracelet bright against bruised skin. Leah, another child, curls tangled, eyes too old. Sarah, Rachel, Layla. 5 faces stared up from the metal, 5 different backgrounds, the same hollow terror in all of them. Victor didn't look directly. His eyes skimmed past and fixed on a stain on the wall. "Prove it," he murmured. "You have pictures from a phone and a bracelet you say you found. That doesn't make me anything but unlucky. You can't put that all on me." His lawyer leaned in, catching the cue. "My client denies all involvement in any alleged trafficking network," he said smoothly. "Unless you can show a clear, documented connection, dates, witnesses, financial trails. This line of questioning is speculative. Either charge him formally, or end this. We won't help you write a story." Ryan let out a short breath through his nose. "You want a connection?" he said. "Your partner on Flight 812 gave us one. He's in another room right now, talking faster than we can type. He walked us through your routes. New York to Denver, Denver to Tel Aviv, Tel Aviv to Haifa. He named you as coordinator. He gave us the usernames you use in your encrypted chats. He told us which buyers call you Avi, and which call you Uncle." He slid a printout across the table. Lines of numbers and arrows connected bank transfers, ATM withdrawals, and flight paths. "We matched his story to your travel history and your wire activity. We pulled GPS metadata from the photos on that burner. Every time one of those girls appears, your phone is within a mile. And that basement in Phoenix? The FBI is there. They've found a reinforced room. Cameras and pictures on the wall that match the ones on this table." Victor's lawyer's pen stilled. A small muscle jumped in his jaw. "We're done," he
he announced, pushing his chair back. From this point on, my client invokes his right to remain silent. Unless you produce a formal charge sheet, this conversation is over. He had just begun to stand, when Victor's hand jerked forward, cuffs clanging as he grabbed his sleeve. The grip was desperate, fingers digging into fabric. "Sit down," Victor hissed under his breath. The mask of indifference slipped, and panic bled through. The lawyer froze, then lowered himself slowly, eyes narrowing at his own client. Victor stared at the photographs. His breathing picked up, chest rising in quick, shallow pulls. For a long moment he said nothing. Then his shoulders sagged. "I'll talk," he muttered. "Names, storage unit, houses. The ones near ports. The contact in Haifa. I'll give you the drop points. Just keep me away from general population." Men convicted of crimes against children learned quickly what Gen Pop meant. Victor knew it before any sentence was written. Ryan leaned closer, voice dropping. "You don't get to bargain," he said. "You are not at an auction. You don't get deals. And you don't get to choose your neighbors. You already bought your sentence. The only thing you can change now is how many kids we find before your door closes." A social worker stepped in first, flats whispering on the concrete. She held a clipboard against her chest, and scanned the room quickly, measuring threat. Her eyes softened only when she turned to the figure behind her. Layla stepped through the doorway. She wore clean clothes now, but the faint rope marks on her wrists hadn't faded. One hand gripped Koda's leash like a rope. The other vanished into the fur at his neck. Koda rose without being told and moved with her, planting himself squarely between her and the table as if he had done this kind of guarding his whole life. The sound of chains shifting was the only noise Victor made. He stared at her like she was a ghost that had stepped out of a closed coffin. The last time he had held that wrist, she hadn't dared make eye contact. Now she stood in front of him under government lights, surrounded by people who didn't flinch from her fear. The social worker stopped at Layla's shoulder. "You don't owe him anything," she said quietly. "You're safe, whether you speak or not. Remember that." Layla nodded, eyes never leaving Victor. Her throat bobbed once. She took a small step closer to Koda, as if drawing courage from the rhythm of his breathing. Ryan could feel the dog's muscles humming under the fur. Koda was as alert as he had been in the terminal, sensing the same predator, now caged. "My name is Layla Cohen," she said. Her voice was soft, edged with tremor, but the words came out clear. "Not Rachel, not whatever you put on that passport." Victor's eyelids fluttered. "My mother is alive," Layla went on. "You told me you would kill her if I ran, if I screamed, if I told anyone. You said nobody would believe me. You said the police would see your suit and your smile and think you were my father." Her gaze dropped to Koda for half a second, then lifted again sharper. "But he believed me," she said. Koda stepped half a pace forward at the gesture, chest expanding, eyes never leaving Victor's face. The leash tightened between his collar and Layla's fist. In that cramped room, the line might as well have been a drawn boundary. Child on one side, predator on the other, dog in the middle. Something in Victor finally snapped. His shoulders, which had stayed high and rigid through hours of questioning, collapsed. His mouth trembled. For a second he looked less like the confident man, striding through airports, and more like someone who had just been shoved to the edge of a cliff and told to look down. "Enough," he whispered. Ryan stayed silent. "I'll give you everything," Victor said, louder now, as if the words were being dragged out of him. 11 more drop points. The Airbnb in Denver. The house in Phoenix we haven't used yet. The storage outside Newark. The villa near Haifa. The drivers. The middlemen. The chat names. The codes. The clinics that fake exams. The hotels that leave doors unlocked. All of it. I'll draw you a map. Tears tracked down his cheeks, cutting lines through dried sweat. The lawyer stared at him, shocked, calculations collapsing one by one. This was no longer strategy. It was surrender. Koda did not relax. He stood braced in front of Layla, muscles tight, as if he understood that each place Victor named held another bed, another lock, another child waiting for someone to notice. Layla didn't smile, didn't cry. She simply leaned her forehead against Koda's neck for a moment and closed her eyes. listening as the man who promised she would disappear instead began to unravel the network that had counted her as product, not as a person.
December laid a thin veil of snow over Denver International, softening the glare of runway lights until the whole airport looked slightly blurred, like an old photograph. Planes still came and went, ground crews still shouted over engines, passengers still hurried with their eyes on departure boards, yet Gate B-17 carried a weight the others did not. 6 months earlier, a child had almost vanished from this spot. 6 months earlier, a dog had refused to let that happen. Inside the concourse, people stamped slush from their boots and wrapped their hands around paper cups of coffee. Near the boarding lane for B-17, a small crowd had gathered around a sign hidden beneath a black cloth. There was no brass band, no confetti, only a few chairs, a simple podium, and a scattering of cameras. The ceremony was brief by design. Airports did not like delays. It existed not to dramatize what had happened, but to mark it, the way a scar marks healed skin. Ryan stood near the side, posture straight, new insignia on his collar. Since June, his work had stretched far beyond this building. The case that started with a K9 blocking a stranger at this gate had grown into a multinational operation. With Volkov's confession, GPS pings from the burner phone, bank wires, and chat logs, task forces in multiple cities had traced routes, raided safe houses, and arrested accomplices. The network that once treated girls like cargo had been broken open across 5 countries. 9 girls were found alive. The first time each door opened, they shrank back, expecting another stranger with orders, not officers with blankets. Some fought, some froze, some clung to the first person who spoke gently. They carried nightmares that no arrest could erase, yet they also carried something traffickers never planned for: another chance. Therapists, foster families, relatives, and advocates began the slow work of convincing them that the world held more than locked rooms and promises made with knives behind them. 8 other names appeared in the final report under a colder heading. Those girls were identified from remains, old photographs, medical records, and belongings recovered from basements and fields. Their families received calls that ended the unbearable suspense of not knowing, but opened grief so sharp it took their breath. Some held funerals with full coffins, some buried only clothing, some gathered around framed portraits and lit candles. For them, justice meant not revenge, but the certainty that the man who arranged their children's final journeys would never again walk past a school gate. That man, once Victor Lang in a charcoal suit, now answered to his real name, Danil Volkov. In court, he faced evidence stacked taller than he was. Forensic accountants traced payments. Investigators tied him to properties on 3 continents. Digital teams projected decrypted chats onto a screen while jurors listened to his own words. Lila's recorded testimony played in the hushed courtroom, her small voice describing the drive, the threats, the 3-finger signal, the moment Koda blocked their path. When the judge pronounced life without parole, Volkov stared at the table, shackles faintly rattling. He would grow old behind steel rather than in airport lounges. Far from the courtroom, the work continued. A townhouse in Haifa that had once disguised a transit hub now stood empty, the door sealed with police tape. Storage units near Newark and Phoenix, once filled with forged documents and children's clothes, stood cleared out and cataloged. Reports moved through government channels carrying dry phrases like network dismantled and survivors relocated. Many agents quietly considered the number of parents who would not receive a call because someone had intervened too late in the past. At B-17, the change was visible. The airport administrator stepped up to the hidden sign, said a few words about vigilance and community, then pulled away the cloth. Beneath the fluorescent lights, new lettering gleamed. The top line read, "See something? Say something." Below it, in bold text, "A gesture can save a life." Between them, a photograph showed a young girl beside a German shepherd in a DHS vest. Her smile was small but real. His ears were slightly forward, as if listening. Her hand rested against his neck, fingers curled into fur as naturally as if she had been doing it for years. Lila stood only a few feet from that image of herself. Time had added a little height and rounded out her cheeks, but the Star of David at her throat was the same one she had worn on the day it glinted under terminal lights. Faint lines on her wrists told their own history, but they were fading. The pigtails were neater. The hunched posture was gone. She held Koda's leash in one hand, knuckles steady rather than white. Koda sat pressed against her leg, fur glossy, vest snug, a small ribbon attached to it now. Weeks earlier, in Washington, he had stood on another stage, while officials spoke about courage, service, and instinct. A medal had been placed around his neck, then moved to a display case at the station, but the ribbon stayed. To Koda, none of it mattered as much as the familiar scent of the girl at his side and the satisfied hum in Ryan's voice when he said, "Good boy." The speeches ended. The cameras dipped. Passengers flowed around the small cluster, some pausing to read the new sign, some barely glancing up. Lila's mother, Talia, who had flown in from Brooklyn, crossed to Ryan and pulled him into a hug that crushed his ribs. She thanked him in English and Hebrew until her words blurred with tears. He stood there, awkward and moved, murmuring that many people had worked this case, that he had only done his job, but she shook her head. Her daughter was alive. No explanation could dilute that fact. Then the space around the podium loosened, and nobody seemed to be telling Lila what to do next. She turned away from the sign and focused on Koda. The buzz of the concourse slipped to the background. Dropping to her knees, she cupped his face between her palms, leaned close, and spoke softly. "You heard me when no one else did," she said. "You saw me." Her eyes filled faster than she could wipe them. Koda leaned into her hands and gave a single, deliberate lick across the tears on her cheek. The simple, untrained response made several hardened officers look away. The social worker, who had walked Lila into the interrogation room months earlier, let out the breath she'd been holding and smiled without reservation for the first time that day. In the months since the rescue, Lila had begun visiting schools and community centers with a counselor and local officers. At each stop, she stood in front of rows of children and raised 3 fingers. "This means I need help and I can't say it out loud," she explained. "If you ever see someone doing this and they look scared, don't laugh and don't ignore it. Get an adult. Call for help. Stay with them until someone comes." Some of the kids giggled nervously, then grew serious as they practiced the motion. Parents filmed the talks, saving them to show younger siblings later. Slowly, the signal that once passed over the heads of hurried travelers at Denver began to spread. For Ryan and Koda, the case at B-17 became both a memory and a model. After the trial, they were assigned to the new DHS Sentinel Task Force, created to hunt the routes that traffickers trace through busy transportation hubs. Their days turned into patterns of briefings, flights, surveillance footage, and raids. Koda learned the rhythms of more airports, more bus terminals, more warehouses. He drew lines of invisible connection between fear, cash, and movement that no algorithm could fully mimic. On one wall of the task force office, a whiteboard carried a number that changed every few weeks. Each time a child was pulled out of a situation that mirrored Lila's, someone updated the count. 2 years after that morning in June, the number read 47. Ryan looked at it whenever exhaustion whispered that they were only scratching the surface. 47 did not erase the pain of those already lost, but it meant that 47 families had a future they almost did not get. Sometimes, after long stretches away, Ryan found himself routed back through Denver. When duty allowed, he would walk down to B-17 with Koda at his heel. Travelers barely glanced at them. The sign by the gate remained, its message simple and steady. A gesture can save a life. Below, the photograph of a girl and a dog watched strangers stream past. Every so often, Ryan noticed a child tug a parent's sleeve, point at the 3 raised fingers in the picture, and demonstrate the signal. Those moments told him something the case files never could. The world was still dangerous, still unfair, but it had learned a wordless language it once did not know. Somewhere, someday, another child might lift 3 fingers in a crowd, and because of what happened here, someone would recognize the plea and step forward instead of walking away. You just walked through a story built from fear, instinct, and one tiny silent signal, following a little girl, a tired handler, and a working dog who refused to treat her distress as background noise. You saw how an ordinary June morning at a crowded airport almost turned into another invisible disappearance, how a child was a few minutes away from being shipped through a network that priced innocence, and how one animal's reaction forced adults, systems, and entire agencies to stop pretending nothing was wrong. You watched a man in a clean suit crumble when passports, hidden cash, trophies, and photographs exposed what his trained smile tried to hide. You heard a whisper in Hebrew that an officer could not translate, yet you understood it anyway, because every instinct inside you recognized the meaning behind those shaking words. I am not safe with this man. I belong to someone else. I need someone to believe me before the door closes and the plane lifts off. You saw a sprint across hot tarmac, a frozen taxiway, a calm-looking courier in row 19 holding 3 small passports, and a note that treated children like negotiable cargo. You sat inside a concrete room while a trafficker tried to bargain with lives he had already sold and watched him break when a 9-year-old girl walked in holding a leash, said her real name on record, and pointed to the dog who had believed her without hearing a single full sentence. You followed the ripples that moved outward from that moment. Through 5 countries, through raids on basements, through doors that finally opened for girls who thought nobody was coming, through courtrooms where families heard the word life attached to the man who helped steal their children's futures. You stood months later at Gate B-17 under a sign that reads, "See something? Say something." A gesture can save a life, and you understood that the photograph beneath it is more than a feel-good image. It is a reminder that a single look, a tiny motion of 3 fingers closing into a fist, can trigger a chain reaction that crosses borders, cracks encrypted chats, reroutes aircraft, and turns missing back into found. Now you are here, at the end of this account, and the most important truth is not what happened to Lila, Victor, or Koda, but what happens next in your world. Because while you scroll past this video or set down your phone, another child is stepping into a hallway, terminal, parking lot, school entrance, bus station, or shopping mall with a stranger who knows exactly how to appear harmless. Another version of Victor is answering questions for staff with effortless charm, squeezing a thin wrist just out of sight, relying on the hope that bystanders will not want to get involved. Another possible Lila is staring at the floor, trying to remember something a counselor, teacher, or parent once explained about signals and safety, wondering whether anyone will notice if she raises her hand and folds 3 fingers into a fist near her chest. Somewhere there might be no trained K9 walking past at the perfect second. No experienced handler choosing instinct over convenience. No federal team close enough to block a jet bridge before a stolen seat reaches the sky. That is where you stop being just an audience and become part of the story. You are not powerless here. You are part of the crowd that either keeps moving or pauses. Part of the community that either pretends nothing looks wrong or chooses to act on a feeling that something does. Right now, while details are still sharp in your mind, you can decide that this does not stay a piece of content you watched and forgot. It can become a rule you live by. Start with the people closest to you. Teach your kids, siblings, nieces, nephews, students, and neighbors that their bodies and voices matter, and that when their voice is trapped by fear or threats, their hands can still speak. Show them the 3-fingered distress signal. Practice it with them. Make it clear that this gesture is never a joke, never a trend, never a prank for attention. Explain that if they ever feel unsafe with anyone, even someone the family knows, they have the right to use it and to keep using it until an adult responds. Then train your own eyes. Memorize the sign so that if you ever see a child making it in a car window, a checkout line, a classroom doorway, or an airport seating area, you will recognize it for what it is. Promise yourself you will not talk yourself out of what you saw. Acting does not always mean charging in alone. It can mean calling emergency services, notifying security, talking to a gate agent, quietly following at a distance while you seek help, or filming enough to preserve evidence if the situation suddenly moves. Small actions can interrupt a pipeline that depends on silence and hesitation. When you travel, refuse to go fully numb. Pay attention to the children around you the way you would want others to watch over your own family. Notice who has luggage and who does not. Notice grips that are too tight, answers that never come from the child, rehearsed explanations that spill out a little too fast. You do not have to accuse on the spot. You can simply say, "Something feels wrong here," to someone whose job includes responding when something feels wrong. Outside terminals and stations, use your voice and your reach. Save this story. Share it with at least one person who has responsibility for kids. Talk about the three-finger signal at home, at work, and online. Push against the idea that vigilance is paranoid and replace it with the truth that vigilance is love, that paying attention is how communities quietly defend their most vulnerable members. And if this episode hit you in the chest, if there was a moment where you had to swallow hard because you saw your own child, your younger self, or someone you love in that fluorescent-drenched concourse, do one more thing. Stay connected. Subscribe and turn on the bell so you do not miss the next true case, the next set of warning signs, the next example of an ordinary person who refused to walk past. Next week, we will bring you the story of a boy who could not risk raising his hand or speaking out loud, who used the only thing he could move without drawing attention, his shoe, to tap a secret message that a K9 translated into a rescue before the bus crossed state lines. Until that premieres, carry Lila's courage, Koda's instinct, and the quiet power of that sign at gate B17 with you. Every time you step into a crowded place, remember you have a choice. Drift through as another pair of blind eyes, or stand ready as the one person who notices a small signal and refuses to let the next child disappear. Your attention, your phone, and your courage might be the only alarm that child ever gets today, alive.